The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a pale sheen on the beige walls and the long conference table that seemed suddenly much too narrow for what was about to unfold. 23 people sat across from me, arranged in a deliberate semicircle that made it impossible to mistake the dynamic. Me on one side, all of them on the other. Garrett Hurst. My direct supervisor stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled just enough to seem casual. He held a folder in one hand, flipping it open with a kind of performative calm. To his right, Tana Doyle, his ever-eager assistant, clutched a thicker stack of papers, her knuckles pale. "Let's begin," Garrett said, voice measured, almost pleasant. Tana cleared her throat. "These are collaborative observations gathered over the past several weeks." The first item landed like a slap, wrapped in bubble wrap. Number 1 arrives at work before anyone else, creating unrealistic expectations for punctuality. A murmur passed down the table. Tana didn't pause. Number 2 completes projects ahead of schedule, putting pressure on peers. Number 3 eats lunch at her desk, implying team time is unimportant. Number 4 doesn't attend team trivia nights or happy hours. Number 5 maintains a too neutral tone in emails. They kept going. Tana read each item with the cadence of someone announcing airport gate changes. Her voice was neutral, practiced, almost bored. But the message wasn't. I sat motionless, spine-tall hands folded over a navy dress I'd worn for quiet confidence. Around me, heads nodded along. Nico Vega smirked into his coffee. Lynn tapped her pen like she was timing a performance. By the time we hit number 80, I could feel the weight of the room shifting not toward empathy but expectation. They were waiting for me to falter, to argue, to cry, to crumble just enough to justify everything they were doing. When Tana reached number 190, makes quiet humming sounds during work hours, which distracts others, she placed the papers down, and the silence was almost holy. I stood, smoothed the front of my dress, met Garrett's eyes, and then all of theirs. "Thank you for the feedback," I said clearly. Then I pulled my phone from my bag and dialed the number I'd memorized days ago. "Yes," I said. "This is Isolde Caro. I accept the offer." "The bonus is fine." Gasps. A paper slid to the floor. Garrett's jaw tensed. Tana blinked like I'd spoken another language. I slid my phone back into my purse, turned toward the door, and walked out. The hallway lights seemed a little brighter than when I'd walked in. It was a Tuesday night, and the office had emptied 2 hours ago. Rain lashed the windows like it wanted in, and the dull blue glow of my monitor painted everything around me in quiet fatigue. I was alone in the corner suite. They'd never officially assigned me, just started using because no one else bothered to clean it out. My eyes ached, shoulders tight from 12 hours of holding the place together. I was reviewing client feedback, most of it glowing, none of it attributed to me when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out. Then I answered. "Is this Isolde Caro?" a voice asked. Precise, confident, female. "Yes. This is Marina Lucent, executive recruitment at Calderon and Witt." I sat up straighter. "We've been watching your work," she continued. "Quiet brilliance is hard to miss." I said nothing. "We'd like to make you an offer, Director of Operational Integrity, full autonomy, a team of your choosing, starting salary $250, plus a $75,000 signing bonus." I blinked. "We're not just impressed," she added. "We're clear. You're the architect behind several high-retention contracts we've lost to Emerald Axis. We know who you are, even if they pretend not to." I looked out the window. Streetlights blurred behind the rain. "I'm not actively looking." "I know," she said. "People like you rarely are. That's why they're so easy to take for granted." I let the silence stretch. I could still hear Garrett from earlier that day joking in the hallway about some people needing to smile more. I'd been the only one in earshot. "You don't owe loyalty to people who exploit you," Ms. Caro, Marina said gently. I opened my mouth, closed it again. The offer was staggering, the recognition intoxicating, but loyalty had its own gravity, even when misplaced. I need time, I said finally. Take it, she replied. But not too long. People like you should be somewhere that puts your name on the door. She hung up. I sat there long after the line went dead, listening to the rain beat against the glass and wondering how long I'd been waiting for a call like that. In the beginning, I didn't mind being invisible. 3 years ago, Emerald Axis hired me as a mid-level operations analyst. No fanfare, no mentorship, just a desk and a list of overdue reports. The infrastructure was a mess. The client systems were duct taped together with expired plugins and blind faith. But I liked puzzles, and the quiet of being underestimated gave me room to work. The first time I saved them, it was overnight. A client portal had crashed 36 hours before a quarterly review with a major manufacturing account. Everyone panicked. I stayed until 2 a.m., rebuilt the interface, and tested the backup path 3 times before emailing Garrett the login credentials. He presented it the next morning like it was his idea. Later, a miscalculated tax input nearly tanked a defense vendor contract. The error, $30,000 off, would have triggered a termination clause. I caught it, rewrote the calculations by hand, and re-delivered the file under Garrett's name. The contract stayed. He got a performance bonus. When Tana couldn't decipher the vendor compliance forms, I rewrote them into usable templates. She submitted them without edits. At the next department briefing, she was applauded for creating a unified format. I told myself it didn't matter. I was solving problems. I was adding value. If no one noticed, that was fine as long as the work spoke for itself. But over time, the silence grew teeth. Garrett rose to Senior VP of Operations. Tana became a strategic associate. I remained stable. My reviews were labeled efficient, but low impact. I didn't complain. I didn't politic. I thought merit would do what words couldn't. It didn't. Instead, the more I cleaned up behind others, the more it became expected. The less I was thanked, the more they forgot I'd ever done it. My silence once my strength had become their license to erase me, and slowly I started to realize they weren't just ignoring my contributions. They were beginning to resent them. It started in whispers and side glances and jokes that weren't quite jokes in praise that landed a seat away from me. And then it started showing up in ways that could be counted. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was just Tana casually saying in a project sync, "Well, not everyone can be as coldly efficient as Isolde." The room laughed like she was being playful, but her tone held just enough edge to leave a mark. No one corrected her. Then Garrett, during a quarterly town hall, referred to me as our department's very own operations robot. Another laugh. I smiled politely. What else could I do? Nico Vega started posting passive-aggressive memes in the team chat. When your coworker finishes everything before lunch but doesn't talk to you once. Clapping emojis, laughing faces. People tagged each other, not me. I was the subtext. I was always the subtext. Meetings I used to lead got reassigned. Brainstorm invites no longer hit my calendar. I'd hear decisions I should have been part of being referenced as if they'd always existed without me. Then came the calendar invite from HR Soft Skills Calibration, Individual Development Session. The room was quiet. Just me and a woman named Brenna from HR who smelled like cinnamon gum and caution. "I just want to share some feedback," she began. "A few team members have expressed concerns." I nodded. I already knew. Some feel your performance can make others feel inadequate. I said nothing. "There's also a perception that you don't blend with the team, because I don't attend happy hours." She hesitated. "It's more of a general feeling. You're very precise, controlled, perfect. Is that bad?" "It's intimidating," she replied gently, as if I were the one who needed comforting. I left the room with a tight smile and a tight stomach. I wasn't being evaluated anymore. I was being softened for a fall. They weren't just dismissing me now. They were preparing to discredit me. And the part that stung the most, I had seen it coming and still hoped I was wrong. But by the time I returned to my desk, I could already feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. It was the kind of moment that would have seemed forgettable to anyone else. Garrett stood in the break room, leaning against the fridge, stirring sugar into his coffee with the slow smugness of someone who thinks they're being clever. "We're documenting patterns now," he said to Nico, voice low but just loud enough. "Team culture matters more than delivery. That's the new direction." I was 2 steps inside the doorway. I stopped just short of being seen. Nico chuckled. Patterns. Garrett shrugged. Little things. Consistency of behavior, contributions to collaboration, that kind of thing. My heart thudded in the silence between them. I backed out slowly, unnoticed. Later that afternoon, I passed Tana near the copier. She was whispering to Lynn, laughing under her breath. "Number 47 was hilarious," she said. "It's the way she brings those glass containers, like she's above takeout." My breath caught. I didn't need to hear more. They were tracking me. My habits, my lunch, my tone of voice, the time I arrived, the way I wrote emails. Every detail turned into a joke, a pattern, a strike against me, like I was some internal threat being cataloged and quietly marked for deletion. The list was real. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold. Rain tapped softly at the window. I opened my laptop and pulled up Marina's email. Her words echoed from memory. "You don't owe loyalty to people who exploit you." I typed up my resignation. It was clean, professional, direct. Then I stared at it for an hour and closed the laptop without sending it. I wasn't ready. Not because I doubted my worth, but because some part of me still wanted to believe they'd stop before it got worse. That professionalism might shield me one last time. Or maybe I just didn't want them to win by pushing me out before I was ready. But deep down, I knew something had changed. And when the final push came, I would not be the one caught off guard. The calendar invite came on a Wednesday morning, subject urgent collaboration meeting. All hands mandatory. No agenda, no context. Just a time, a room, and Garrett's name in bold. When I walked in, I knew. One chair had been placed apart from the table, facing 23 seated colleagues like a defendant at trial. A vinyl banner hung crookedly behind Garrett's shoulder. Team Improvement Initiative Building Better Together. Tana stood beside him, clutching a thick stack of paper with both hands. Garrett gestured to the solitary chair. "Isolde, please." I sat. I didn't speak. Tana cleared her throat. Over the past several weeks, the team has been observing collaborative patterns and documenting behaviors that affect cohesion. We've compiled them for constructive discussion. She read, "Number 1, brings personal coffee in a thermos-declining group cafe runs. Number 2, finishes pitch decks too early, creating performance anxiety in peers. Number 3, corrects client requests mid-call, disrupting group rapport. Number 4, doesn't watch Succession, creating conversational gaps in the team culture." They didn't even bother disguising the absurdity. She kept reading. 2 hours, every petty complaint, every rebranded resentment. I listened to it all the way I always had. Somewhere around Reason 86 refuses to participate in Slack reaction chains. I stopped feeling embarrassed. I started feeling clear. They didn't want me to collaborate. They wanted me to conform. They didn't resent what I lacked. They resented what I was. At Reason 144 always remembers deadlines without reminders. Nico coughed to hide a laugh. At Reason 173 politely declines birthday cake. Tana paused like she expected me to apologize. I didn't blink. By the time she reached Reason 190, make soft humming sounds while reviewing spreadsheets, the room had gone silent again. No one looked directly at me. They expected something, a breakdown, an apology, maybe tears. But something had crystallized inside me weeks ago. I wasn't here to absorb their projection. I was here to end it. I stood up, smoothed my dress, felt the weight of Marina's words return to me like a promise. We hire the ones who do the work, not the ones who talk about it. And then I reached for my phone. I held the phone to my ear as the entire room leaned into the silence, waiting to see if I'd crack. Yes, I said, my voice even. This is Isolde Caro. I accept the offer. Monday works perfectly. Gasps rippled through the room like wind across dry leaves. Tana dropped her stack of papers. It hit the floor with a flutter that sounded louder than anything she'd read aloud. Nico blinked his mouth slightly open, as if he'd misheard me. Garrett shifted behind the podium. "Let's not be hasty," he said quickly, stepping forward. "This was meant to be constructive. Feedback, that's all." Not what I asked. Calmly lowering the phone, not a 2-hour attempt to humiliate me into silence, not a scripted ambush built on resentment and projection. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I stepped away from the solitary chair. "You said I don't belong here." I continued my gaze steady. Luckily, somewhere else already agrees, and they didn't need a list to see my value. The room stayed frozen. No one spoke. No one stood. Their power was performative, fragile, hollow. I'd mistaken it for structure. It was scaffolding overwrought. I gathered my notebook, the same one I'd used for client recovery plans and emergency workflows plans that had saved them millions. I tucked it under my arm. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't burn anything on my way out. I walked, quietly, precisely, the same way I'd held this department together for 3 years. But as I stepped into the elevator, something in me shifted. I had always thought the exit would feel like failure, like giving up. But instead it felt like punctuation, like the final line of a chapter I had outgrown long before I had the courage to end it. When I got home, I placed my badge in a drawer and opened the bottom file cabinet where I kept the records, the ones no one knew I'd kept. I spent the evening scanning pages. 3 years of notes, painstaking, obsessive, thorough. Not company files, mine. Handwritten reminders of every call, every client workaround, every moment I salvaged something broken that someone else had almost lost. I hadn't kept them out of paranoia. I'd kept them because I cared. Preferences, communication chains, the real decision makers versus the ones who just sat in meetings. Pain points that never made it into official reports, relationship maps, follow-up habits, what mattered, what didn't. I hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply preserved the truth of what I'd built. By noon the next day, my phone rang. Isolde. The voice was careful, familiar. One of our long-term clients, a logistics firm whose CFO had once cried on the phone with me during a vendor collapse. "We heard you left. Just wanted to say if you're with a new firm, we'd like to continue working with you." Within 48 hours, 5 different clients reached out to Calderon and Witt directly, not to inquire, to request. One of them was blunt. "We want her, not the firm." By the end of the week, Marina called. "Your name's spreading fast," she said, laughing softly. "I've never seen clients move this quickly. They're not asking what Calderon can do for them. They're asking if you'll be available." I didn't know what to say. She filled the silence. "You didn't just do your job. You built trust. That doesn't vanish when you change your email address." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. A part of me still expected guilt to arrive. A flicker of betrayal, maybe even fear. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt something steadier. The quiet satisfaction of being seen, finally, for what I'd actually done. By the time Monday came, I had 7 meetings on the calendar, 3 of them with clients who hadn't even waited for my official onboarding announcement. And just before I left for my first day at Calderon and Witt, I saw the subject line in my inbox from Garrett Hurst. Subject, quick chat. 2 months after I walked out of that conference room, I unlocked the glass door to Calderon and Witt's new regional office. 3 blocks from Emerald Axis. I stepped inside before sunrise just as the movers were finishing the last of the setup. The glass still smelled faintly of adhesive. I ran my hand over the etched lettering near the entrance, tracing the sharp lines of my name, Isolde Caro, Director. It wasn't just a title. It was proof. The space was clean, modern light, filtering in through floor-to-ceiling windows furniture positioned for function rather than posturing. My desk faced east, giving me a clear view of the narrow street below. At 9:17 a.m., I saw Garrett. He was crossing toward Emerald Axis briefcase in one hand, phone in the other. He glanced up instinctively, his eyes locked on the lettering. He stopped mid-step, stared, then slowly pulled out his phone and made a call without looking away from the window. He didn't smile. By 2 p.m., 3 people I used to work with passed by. First Nico, pretending not to look, then Lynn, holding an iced coffee she didn't sip. Finally, Tana, who walked half a block past the building before doubling back like she'd forgotten something. None of them waved, none of them knocked, but all of them looked. At 3 p.m., a car pulled into our visitor space. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out holding 2 cups of coffee. I recognized him immediately, Ron Talbert, VP at Mornix Energy. He'd been unreachable for the last 6 months of my time at Emerald, always too busy to review deliverables. Now he walked straight through the front door like he'd never left. Glad we found where the real work went, he said with a smile, offering one of the coffees like we'd always done this. I nodded, letting him in. By the time he left, 3 more emails had arrived, clients requesting introductions, calendar invites to exploratory calls, and one short message from Marina with a subject line that said only, ready for the next move. Marina stopped by on a Friday morning just before the quarterly numbers were finalized. She brought a box of pastries and a folder full of onboarding stats that neither of us ended up opening. Instead, we stood near the window of my office, watching the light stretch across the skyline. She leaned on the frame, coffee in hand. Any regrets? I looked out across the city, glass and steel movement, and quiet all at once. Somewhere below the sidewalk that led to Emerald Axis blurred into the rhythm of traffic and time. I regret staying invisible for so long, I said. It wasn't bitterness, just clarity. A soft truth I could finally hold without shame. I remembered the list. Not the ridiculous ones, the coffee, the email etiquette, but the real ones. The ones they hadn't known they were writing. Too serious, too focused, too competent. They'd written those words like flaws, like warnings. But they weren't reasons to remove me. They were the exact reasons they feared what I represented. Accountability, precision, standards. Now my name was on the sign. My inbox was full. My team, handpicked and fully empowered, was thriving. We didn't gossip in Slack threads. We didn't compete to look busy. We delivered. And for the first time in my career, I was surrounded by people who weren't intimidated by that. Marina took a bite of her croissant, half laughed. You know, they think you stole their clients. I didn't steal anyone, I said simply. I answered the phone. She nodded. Still, if you ever write a book about all this, let me read the first draft. I smiled, stepping back toward my desk as another meeting notification popped up. Across the glass wall, my name caught the afternoon sun. I'd spent years fixing what others broke quietly, thanklessly. Now I was building something they couldn't touch, couldn't replicate, couldn't erase. The best revenge isn't stealing clients, it's building something they can't copy,